In our last episode, we asked a chilling question. Was Osama Bin Laden a psychopath? Using the Hare Psychopathy Checklist revised, the PCL-R, we scored him 28 out of 40. Just shy of the threshold for clinical psychopathy, but disturbingly high for a man who was never arrested, never tried, and died surrounded by his wives and children, not in a prison cell.
We applied that tool with caution because, as forensic psychologist D. Anand reminded us, the Hare checklist is a powerful diagnostic hammer, but not every subject is a nail. Still, the PCL-R gave us clarity. It exposed Bin Laden's grandiosity, emotional detachment, manipulation, and lack of remorse, traits often camouflaged by his religious rhetoric and ideological purpose. But that was only part of the picture. What if we stepped back? What if we chose a different lens, one that wasn't forged in courtrooms and prisons, but in clinics and theory? One that asks not, is this man dangerous, but how does this man function as a person? Enter the CAPP, the Comprehensive Assessment of Psychopathic Personality. Crafted by Cook, Hart, Logan and Mitchie, the CAPP is a more personality-centered approach. It's a newer model than the PCL-R, and unlike the Hare checklist, which focuses heavily on antisocial behaviour, the CAPP delves deeper into personality structure, how someone perceives themselves, relates to others, and regulates emotions. It doesn't just look for criminal behaviour, it explores 33 core traits grouped into 6 domains: attachment, behavioural, cognitive, dominance, emotional, and self.
And the scoring is different too. Rather than a 0 to 2 scale, each trait is rated on a 7-point continuum, from 0 meaning absent to 6 meaning extreme presence. That gives us a much richer portrait, not just whether a trait existed, but by how much. Now, Bin Laden never sat for a structured CAPP interview, but as a thought experiment, a tool for analysis, not diagnosis, it allows us to revisit the same evidence through a more nuanced frame.
Attachment.
Bin Laden was emotionally detached. He abandoned his homeland, rejected his family. He connected to others through ideology, not intimacy. His followers were tools, his wives confined, his victims invisible. He was disordered.
Behavioural. Here's where things shift. Unlike many psychopathic profiles, Bin Laden wasn't reckless. He was deliberate, measured. No gambling, no sexual risk-taking, no impulsive rages. In fact, he often criticised others in al-Qaeda for being reckless. He's not a strong match.
Cognitive. He was rigid, absolutist, apocalyptic. Bin Laden interpreted global events through a single distorted lens: Islam versus the West, believers versus infidels. There was no nuance, no ambiguity, only certainty. He had high alignment.
Dominance. This is textbook. He wasn't just a leader, he was a controlling ideologue. He groomed martyrs. He issued commandments. He didn't fight with them, he orchestrated them, like a playwright, not a warrior. Strong alignment.
Emotional. Well, he was flat, cold. His letters showed no regret. He showed no warmth even to his family. He intellectualizes everything: strategy, theology, death. But where's the feeling? There's ideology, but no grief. Classic dysfunction.
Self. Messianic. Grandiose. He saw himself as God's instrument, not a man, a symbol. He compared himself to Saladin, claimed divine favour. He was never wrong, never unsure, never small. Overwhelming match. So, what does this tell us? Under the Hare checklist, Bin Laden scored high. largely due to his coldness and manipulation. Under the CAPP, the case is just as compelling, but more textured. The emotional void, the cognitive rigidity, the manipulative dominance, the narcissistic self-image. He might not have looked like a serial killer, but psychologically, he inhabited a landscape just as bleak.
This wasn't just a terrorist, this was a personality organised around control, certainty and detachment. A man who needed to be feared, obeyed and remembered.
And in the next segment, we'll explore just how far that need for control went. When the world stopped listening, Osama Bin Laden kept talking to his followers, to his enemies, to the future. Let's look at what he left behind in the letters, the instructions, the final fragments of a man alone.
فهذه أمريكا قد أصابها الله سبحانه وتعالى.
After 9/11, Osama bin Laden didn't vanish into oblivion. He became a ghost, ghosting in and out of videotaped statements, like a phantasmatic myth. But this ghost was running a global terror network, and from his hideouts, particularly the compound in Abbottabad, he wasn't merely a distant figurehead, he was a micromanager.
In those final years, Bin Laden acted less like a guerrilla leader and more like a Fortune 500 CEO. US analysts nicknamed him the ultimate back-office boss, directing strategy, ideology, and even graphics for his propaganda videos, all via couriers and flash drives. He scrutinized resumes, for example, demanding CVs from Anwar al-Awlaki before approving him as leader in Yemen. He even obsessed over media image, ordering retakes of videos because someone's sock colour wasn't right.
He worried that sloppy operational security would reveal his location. He wrote memos instructing only 2 courier visits per week, even in the same region, advocating patience over speed. He criticised affiliate groups for actions that might alienate potential Muslim supporters, especially when they killed fellow Muslims.
Even in his own family, he was paranoid. He warned his wife not to bring anything, clothes or books, into the compound that could be microchipped. He issued careful instructions to his personal bodyguards, urging them to take oaths about operational secrecy and stalking suspected procedural failures.
But this micromanagement reveals more than paranoia. It shows frustration, a leader trying to stay relevant in a decentralized, splintering movement. He constantly rebuked affiliates in Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, complaining that they were killing too many Muslims, damaging al-Qaeda's reputation. He even tried to get them to sign memoranda of understanding, binding them to follow his strategic leads. In private, he was a disillusioned imperator, not the charismatic prophet of old.
So, was he still the eminence grise, the mastermind pulling all the strings? Yes and no. On one hand, financial transactions, propaganda, target setting came from his orders. On the other, many affiliates ignored him, branch managers acting independently, splintering the brand, and operating beyond his influence.
The man in Abbottabad was micromanaging massively and marginalizing himself, obsessed with control, burnt out by fragmentation. And as the world turned, he turned darker. In isolation, his empire slowly slipping from his grasp. Control obsession, grandiosity, failure to accept responsibility. Those PCL-R traits didn't fade, they intensified. In the next segment, we'll follow him into the shadows, into the Abbottabad files, where his private communications reveal the final chapters of a man trying to control the uncontrollable. When US Navy SEALs raided Bin Laden's compound in 2011, they recovered more than his body. They found a library, hundreds of documents, speeches, letters to his followers, drafted communiques to world leaders.
These writings are chilling, not for what they say, but for how they say it. Bin Laden rants about branding. He scolds al-Qaeda franchises for messy public relations. He micromanages martyrdom videos like a frustrated film director.
Here's a man who orchestrated the deadliest attack in modern history, fussing over fonts and graphics.
And never, not once, expressing remorse. He shows no recognition of human cost, no grief, no empathy. Instead, he blames everything on America, Israel, the West, corruption, apostasy, everyone but himself.
And it's not just narcissism, it's a form of cold clinical detachment, the same detachment you find in certain kinds of cult leaders and certain kinds of killers. Those final letters, they're not just disturbing, they're disembodied, as if the man writing them had already stepped outside of himself, a ghost watching his movement fall apart one botched plot at a time. There's an eerie detachment there, the same detachment you find in certain kinds of cult leaders and certain kinds of killers.
Osama Bin Laden didn't need to detonate a bomb or hijack a plane. He simply had to speak and men would die. From New York to Nairobi, Kandahar to Casablanca, he became a symbol of jihad, the shepherd of martyrs. And he cultivated that persona with the same obsessive precision we saw in his letters.
Which is why a controversial comparison can be useful here, not to equate, but to examine.
Charles Manson.
Who do you think I am? And this is only a couple hours. Can you imagine what it would be like a couple days with me?
Manson, cult leader, failed musician, but to his followers, a prophet, a man whose words sparked slaughter. Just like Bin Laden, Manson convinced others to kill for him, while he kept his own hands clean.
The scale is different, of course, but what they shared was weaponized charisma, a control that went beyond fear into the realm of belief.
Manson peddled a fantasy, helter-skelter, and his acolytes internalized it as if it was a holy war. Bin Laden peddled an ideology, a twisted interpretation of jihad, and his acolytes did the same.
The difference? Manson's war never really existed, but Bin Laden's did.
It's easy to reduce both to madmen. But this isn't about madness, it's about myth. Both men manufactured an identity so potent that others surrendered their own lives. They didn't just recruit followers, they made believers.
And when a leader's belief becomes more important than a follower's conscience, you get carnage.
In those final years, as his movement fragmented and his orders were increasingly ignored, Bin Laden seemed to retreat from man into myth, from prophet into propaganda.
And yet he still clung to control, through letters, through memos, through martyrdom videos and messages sent by foot courier, until one night he ran out of places to hide.
That's where we go next, to Abbottabad, to the night he died, to a myth brought down to earth in the dark.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good evening. I'm George Stephanopoulos in New York. We're interrupting your program because we have learned, ABC News has learned, that Osama Bin Laden has been killed. I want to go straight to Jake Tapper at the White House. Jake Tapper, this is the founder of al-Qaeda, the man responsible for the 9/11 attacks in 2001.
That's right.
Osama Bin Laden died on May the 2nd, 2011, at the hands of US Navy SEALs in Abbottabad, Pakistan, shot in the head and chest, his body buried at sea. No trial, no tribunal, no martyr's podium.
It felt like closure, but it wasn't.
The United States had invaded Afghanistan on October the 7th, 2001, less than a month after 9/11. Iraq came later, March the 20th, 2003, under the banner of weapons of mass destruction and regime change.
But what began as a war on terror became a decade of regional destabilization. Authoritarian regimes fell, but nothing stable took their place. Power vacuums became breeding grounds for new insurgents, militias, extremist splinters, ISIS.
Then came the Arab Spring, sparked in 2010 by a fruit vendor's self-immolation in Tunisia. It spread like wildfire, toppling governments in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya and Yemen. But dreams of democracy quickly turned to civil war and chaos.
Muammar Gaddafi was lynched in Libya, Syria collapsed into prolonged brutal conflict, and in Iraq, the invasion and the disbanding of Saddam's army arguably laid the groundwork for ISIS.
In the West, fear calcified into suspicion. Islamophobia spread, not just in tabloids and talk radio, but in law.
In the US, the Patriot Act permitted warrantless surveillance, indefinite detention, and racial profiling. In the UK, MI5 monitored mosques, and Muslims were disproportionately stopped under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act.
Mosques were vandalised, women in hijabs attacked, and populist leaders in Europe and America stoked the flames, depicting Islam not just as a religion, but as a threat.
The result, a widening gulf, not just between Muslims and non-Muslims, but between the East and the West, between those who saw Bin Laden as a murderer and those who saw him as the symptom of something deeper.
And so we ask again, was Bin Laden an aberration or a mirror of something darker?
Let's be clear. The vast majority of Muslims globally rejected Bin Laden. They spoke out, they acted. Many offered a different vision for Islam in the modern world.
A powerful example came in 2009 when President Barack Obama spoke from Cairo University.
All of us share this world for but a brief moment in time. The question is whether we spend that time focused on what pushes us apart, or whether we commit ourselves to an effort, a sustained effort, to find common ground, to focus on the future we seek for our children, and to respect the dignity of all human beings.
That speech framed Islam and America not as natural antagonists, but as overlapping communities rooted in mutual respect and shared values. It was a call to put an end to suspicion and build a peaceful future together.
Obama's words didn't erase fear overnight, but they showed a path forward, a different path, a more hopeful one. And it was echoed in the actions of ordinary Muslims afterwards, imams condemning terrorism, mosque leaders organising vigils, communities working with police to prevent radicalisation.
As we said, the Patriot Act in the US allowed surveillance targeting Muslims, and in the UK, mosques were monitored under Schedule 7. So the gulf widened, but it wasn't inevitable. There were voices calling for understanding, not division.
And that hope wasn't enough to stop the wars, the sectarian violence, or the next wave of terror. But it mattered. It remains a vital part of our story. So, what was left in Osama bin Laden's wake? Al-Qaeda survived, barely. ISIS rose, more violent, more chaotic, less centralized.
The security state expanded, airports changed, surveillance deepened, Islamophobia surged, drone warfare escalated. In July 2022, bin Laden's successor, Ayman al-Zawahiri, was killed by a CIA drone as he stood on a balcony in Kabul.
Justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. We make it clear again tonight that no matter how long it takes, no matter where you hide, if you are a threat to our people, the United States will find you and take you out.
The missile that killed him wasn't explosive. It was a Hellfire R9X, a so-called ninja bomb, armed with 6 blades that deploy mid-flight. No blast, no collateral damage, just clinical kinetic force. Was that assassination? Was it justice? Was it murder? Well, that depends on where you're standing and who you are mourning.
Bin Laden didn't just commit acts of terror. He transformed geopolitics. He changed how nations view fear, how they justify violence, how they build narratives of us and them.
And through it all, he remains enigmatic. Was he mad, bad, or something worse?
The PCL-R gave us a language. The CAPP gave us an alternative tool with which to assess a psychopathic personality. But maybe the truth is this: you don't have to be a clinical psychopath to destroy the world. You just need belief, power, and the tools to spread both.
It's just horrendous. Taliban hitting people, paras with no choice but to hold the line.
The Taliban is in control of Afghanistan. The country's president has fled, and Western countries are scrambling to get people out. And this took the US by surprise.
I did not, nor did anyone else, see a collapse of an army that size in 11 days.
I've broken bread with refugee Afghan journalists who were forced to flee during the chaotic US withdrawal. We've shared food, laughed, played the harmonium, and sung songs to lift the mood. But I felt the room shift when a phone rings, a call from home, a sister whispering, "We're in the basement. The Taliban are in the village. They're shooting." And there we are again, just like on 9/11, watching, powerless. That, for me, is Osama Bin Laden's legacy. A world of fractured families, of diasporas, of perilous voyages in small boats, of children who may never see their homeland again. And the question we leave with is this: how do we live in the world he left behind, without letting it define us?
Was Osama bin Laden a psychopath, or simply a zealot with a gift for manipulation? Should we even be using clinical tools to examine political actors? Or does the act of asking those questions tell us more about ourselves than the man we're studying?
Let's begin with the Hare Psychopathy Checklist, the PCL-R. Bin Laden scored 28 out of 40, just under the US clinical threshold of 30, and well above the UK and European threshold of 25. He ticked many of the boxes: grandiosity, lack of empathy, shallow effect, manipulativeness, and a callous disregard for human life. But he lacked certain traits too. He wasn't impulsive, he wasn't parasitic, and he had long-term goals, however abhorrent. It's a high score, enough in the European system to label him clinically psychopathic.
But the PCL-R isn't the only lens. We also considered the Comprehensive Assessment of Psychopathic Personality, the CAPP. That gave us a more textured picture. Under the CAPP, we saw significant traits in domains like dominance, detachment, and self. He displayed arrogance, emotional coldness, and a fundamental belief in his own righteousness. He demanded obedience, resisted intimacy, and distanced himself from direct violence, all while orchestrating mass murder. But the CAPP also reminded us of what he wasn't. He wasn't hedonistic. He wasn't erratic. He wasn't driven by thrill-seeking or rage. His violence was instrumental, not impulsive. He wasn't mad. He wasn't evil in some cartoonish sense. He was something far more dangerous. A man who believed his cause justified everything, even genocide.
Let us know what you think. This episode, more than any we've made, invites debate. But it also demands empathy, not for the killer, but for the millions whose lives were shaped by his actions.
You've been listening to Psycho Killer, Shocking True Crime Stories. I'm Jacques Morrell.
And I'm Simon Ford. Thanks for thinking with us.